exactly is a Secchi tube? A Secchi tube is a simple tool made from a long, clear tube. It is used to measure water clarity in shallow bodies of water. Why is water clarity important to measure? Well, according to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, soil, or sediment, is one of the main pollutants in Minnesota rivers and streams, and too much sediment in the water can be harmful to fish and aquatic insects. In addition to potentially harming aquatic wildlife, too much sediment in the water can make it unpleasant for humans to look at or to use the water for recreational purposes. And furthermore, excess sediment can make the water undrinkable without going through costly treatment. Rainwater can wash sediment directly into lakes or into rivers and streams that eventually flow into lakes, potentially affecting water quality in all our water resources. However, water that is too clear can also be a sign of problems, as it may indicate a lack of nutrients necessary to sustain aquatic wildlife. So it is important to monitor the condition of all our lakes and streams. But monitoring water clarity in all of the lakes and streams across the entire state of Minnesota is a big job. Fortunately, kids just like you can help. Water clarity monitoring programs, like those supported by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, rely on volunteer efforts from community members of all ages. In part 1 of this 2-part video series, we will meet a Minnesota scientist who will discuss how the Secchi tube is important in his research. We will also show you how to use a Secchi tube properly. So let's meet our scientists and learn how the Secchi tube is used in real-life science.
I'm Chris Philstrup. I'm an applied limnologist who studies lakes and streams at the Natural Resources Research Institute in Duluth, Minnesota. In my research, I use Secchi tubes to get a better understanding of how water clarity changes in streams as you move from the top of the stream or the headwaters all the way to the bottom of the stream or the mouth of the stream. So a Secchi tube is a really simple, cost-effective way to estimate how many particles or sediments there are within the water. And streams can actually be impaired because they have sediment concentrations that are too high. So more simply, it means that the stream isn't healthy. So lots of management agencies focus on trying to remove streams from that impaired list. And so by using the Secchi tube, we can get a better handle on where sediments are coming from within the watershed. So if I have a stream that has an east branch and a west branch, I can take Secchi tube measurements on each of those branches to get a better understanding of where the most sediments are coming from. So then what that tells me is that's where I would want to dedicate most of my management efforts to reduce sediment. And further, we can take a bunch of Secchi tube measurements within that individual branch to see if the sediments are coming from soil being eroded off of the land, or whether or not those sediments are coming from stream bank erosion within the stream itself. So basically the Secchi tube, while it seems like a really simple measurement, it's really informative for both management purposes and research purposes. Streams, lakes, all these aquatic ecosystems, they're connected, right? So the health of one impacts the health of a downstream system. So if we have a stream that's flowing into a lake and that stream is unhealthy or has really high sediment levels, those sediments are eventually going to go into the lake, and now the lake has problems that we need to try to solve. And further, if that lake has an outlet, then that river downstream has those same problems. So all these aquatic ecosystems are connected, so what affects one affects another. If there's a topic you want to know more about, talk to your teacher, ask questions. As a scientist, we're charged with asking questions. That's basically our job. So having that curiosity about how something works is really critical for being a good scientist. And you can start that right now. You can have that curiosity and continue to develop that as you go further and further through school.
Here we see Chris Philstrip using a Secchi tube to measure water clarity. He will use a type of tube that has a small Secchi disc on a cord. Before starting, Dr. Philstrip will ensure that the disc is at the bottom of the tube. It is important to try to fill the tube from midstream when possible, and to do so without disturbing the stream sediments. Notice how he avoids stepping into the stream itself. Also, he places the tube opening toward the flow of the stream. Once the tube is filled, he will slowly raise the cord with the Secchi disc while looking down into the tube from the top. Once he can see the pattern on the disc, he will stop and allow the Secchi disc to lower back down into the tube until the disc just barely disappears from sight. Proper technique will include lowering and raising the disc until he has found the midpoint between the disappearance and reappearance of the disc pattern. Now that he has determined the midpoint where the disc disappears and reappears, he will make a note of the depth of the disc by referring to the gauge on the side of his tube. Scientists collecting data will usually take more than one measurement at the same location and then average the data. Now it's your turn. Kids can do this too. Please be sure to watch part 2 of this video series to see how easy it is to make your very own Secchi tube. Thanks for watching. See you next time.